Okay, hey Nassim, welcome to my startup podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for signing on. I think you said it's around 6:30 your time, so appreciate that signing on in the evening. But yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you virtually.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. It's also my pleasure being here and meeting you today. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm very fascinated by the topic of your startup that you founded. It sounds like it's been involved in a lot of really cool projects, and I want to dive into that. But before we get into that, do you mind just telling me more about your background? What led you to go down the path that you ultimately did, and where did you grow up, or where did you get your influences that led you to become a startup founder?
Well, I actually grew up in Israel, uh, a very tough neighborhood sometimes, talking about decision making, emergency, things like that. And
Right.
then I lived a few years in South America, actually. But
Oh,
as I grew, I had some military background and started working later on with decision makers. And what I found out is, it's interesting, but we talk about decision makers, but most of the time, we're not actually decision makers because no one helps us. No one gives us options. No
mm,
one gives us clarity, maybe some certainty. It's all gut feeling. And one of the major challenges, and I started this more than 2 decades ago, was how can I help decision makers with technology make better decisions. That was one of my things that fascinated me actually.
yeah, no, I think it sounds like a good place to be. I mean, if I've noticed anything by interviewing a lot of founders, it's if you can start a startup that's very close to some like critical transaction, like a payment or something like that, in your case, a decision, then that's where a lot of the value is because you can either make a lot of money or lose a lot of money or other whatever it might be, other resources, one of the good or bad decisions made. So it makes sense to me. Yeah. So what was your first encounter with using AI to inform decisions? Was it clear right away that you could make good decisions, much better decisions, or was there like a trial and error process?
No, so it was a process. Actually,
Yeah.
it's something, I started, like I told you, more than 20 years ago. And it started with talking mainly to people. So I started a lot of discussions with military commanders that actually need to make critical decisions and they don't have any options. They don't understand how they make decisions, what's the trade-offs, what's the impact of every decision. And then I had a lot of meetings with emergency managers, mainly in the US, for example, in North Carolina, talking about floods, issues like that, critical infrastructure, utility companies. And I started thinking, how can I manage this issue? And what happened in the past is we had BI, and that's just giving you some kind of snapshot of the past. Then some predictive analytics. And what I did in my past was I developed a lot of constructive simulations and Markov chains. And actually, that was the basic AI that started. We didn't call it AI, but that was actually AI. And later on, I started with a lot of AI techniques. People talk a lot about AI, but they don't really understand the difference between Gen AI or different techniques like optimization and simulation and heuristic models. I can talk about it a lot of hours, but I
Yeah.
actually saw how fast with Gen AI, for example, we can collect the data and with other techniques really help the decision maker get some options, get more clarity, understand the impact at the end of the process. Because we're talking about decision making and high level decision making, there will always be a man in the loop. But imagine instead of having
Right.
20 people helping you for months, in seconds, you get some kind of answer to a question with options and understanding the different trade-offs that you have. I think that's very valuable. At least that's what I hear from our customers.
That's great. It must be very interesting work being able to work with such a variety of different projects. You mentioned from military to natural disasters in North Carolina. All those, I guess they all have the common thread of needing lots of intelligence brought together in order to make an informed decision. So is there a certain situation that you look for, a certain case that you look for when you're speaking to state governments or national governments or companies to see, okay, this is a problem or a decision where AI could be most helpful for them?
Oh yeah, sure. I can give you a few examples. So first of all, I tell a lot of them, you know, we're trying to help leaders achieve their goals by making better day-to-day decisions. But actually, the main issue is, first of all, when you talk to a decision maker, you see that he actually doesn't have clarity. He doesn't see
Uh,
options. He doesn't understand. Okay, so I made a decision to invest in cyber in my company. What did it impact? I have a change in
right.
I have workforce retiring. It's a big issue in the US today. For example, if we talk
Yeah.
about the national grid, utility companies, there's a lot of people retiring, workforce retiring. How does this impact us? So there's amazing challenges that we speak. So if we talk, for example, to the DoD in the US, they talk about achieving war fighting advantage, what they have today, where they want to be 5 years from now, and what's the impact, and things change, from budgets to constraints to different, events, crises happening around the world. If we talk to emergency managers, their main challenge is how do we mitigate disasters? How can we be better prepared? We need to save lives, communities, and so on. And if we talk to grid operations, it's a big challenge. You're creating now new data centers, and there's old infrastructure. You need to modernize everything. You need to give electricity today to your customers. So those are major challenges. And you see it across the board, from high level decision makers to planners to other people that can use that AI challenge. And, once you take what we do is decision intelligence powered by AI, so you connect a concept to AI. So you bring the AI to help you do what you want to achieve with your models, and you need to train them because it's a very different market. It's not just LLMs, it's not just simple
Right.
machine learning. You need to train it to other concepts. But I think it's a challenge, and we're starting to see a lot of value coming from it.
Yeah, that's great. And so, when you first approach a company or a local government, do they typically have good data that you can use, or do you guys need to like first get them set up with collecting the right data so that you can even train your models, and then from there train your models, or maybe yeah,
So our approach is a little bit different. When I come
yeah,
to customers, I bring 80% generic models already that are based on companies like themselves. For example,
all right,
when I work with a defense customer, all of their doctrine is already implemented, and 20% is tailor-made. And the other challenge is talking about data. Most of the organization thinks they don't have enough data, but I'll tell you
uh,
the truth. The problem is they have too much data,
uh,
and a lot of this data is not good and validated. So I can tell you from my experience, they only will need 20% of the data they have because they have a lot of, it's not nice saying, but a lot of garbage in, garbage out of data.
sure,
And what we're trying to do is once we say, okay, this is the goal of the organization, this is what they're trying to achieve, we build it backwards. We don't start from the data. We say, okay, what we want to achieve. And in our system, we have already generic models ready that every metric, every data point in the model is like a question that says, okay, I need data for this point. And then we start, collecting their data. Actually, we're filtering their data warehouses, their data lakes, and saying, hey, this is actually what you will need to get good recommendations. And sometimes it can impact how they manage today their data because they have a lot of data that is not valuable.
got it. So it's really targeting that pertinent data that's going to best inform the decision, and knowing what data that is.
Yeah.
How did you initially get into this space? Do you have some kind of mentor that initially led you in? I know you've been in it for a long time now, so at this point you're probably you may be very well mentoring someone else, but was there someone that initially got you into it?
It's amazing. When you ask me this question, and I think about it, I actually don't have a mentor. I'm my own mentor for good and bad. I made a lot of mistakes through the way. I'm passionate about what I do and what I like, and I like to help people solve their problems, especially decision makers, especially in high risk environments and very complex problems. So always based on my experience, my ideas. I think I made hundreds and thousands of mistakes along the way, but it brought me to a good place. A lot of people, didn't believe in this concept, and this is why today I'm mentoring a lot of new founders because I want to give them a little bit of my experience and help them,
Yeah.
and understand the way and give them some, some perspective about the way that they're going to.
Yeah, no, that's good that you're mentoring because it's some of that advice that you pass on and any mentor passes on. I mean, it can really save people years of their life if they avoid those pitfalls that previous people just found out by trial and error. So that's yeah, that's definitely huge. Did you start off with a vision for your company, and if so, do you feel like you've achieved that vision, or maybe you've achieved one and now set a even higher bar, but yeah, where did you initially see forecast going?
So yeah, when I started, my vision was empowering leaders to make better decisions. But as we grow, as we move forward, I actually want to help them achieve their goals, make better decisions, get options, use the right way technology, understand the impact of every decision. And we're growing. We started very strong in the defense sector, although, defense tech is now growing again very strongly. We're working very strong in Europe. And we helped a lot of emergency managers. And that was also, we didn't see there a lot of money like we saw, getting the satisfaction of saving lives, ahead, giving them time to evacuate, things like that, things they didn't think about, shelters, or give them options to evacuate by sea they didn't think about. And now we're moving strongly to everything that's called national critical infrastructure, from helping, grid operations with utility companies and hospitals, ports, and things like that. So we're growing and mainly helping. Our process is working with a lot of business partners, connecting together because we need data. And we think we're the layer that can help those decision makers, mainly the guys that are not tech guys, the C-level guys, the guys that need to
Yeah.
make the high level decisions.
Yeah. And is there a, particular decision that you informed that you're most proud of that you could kind of take us through like the process of yeah, taking in the data, the options that were on the table, like that the executive could have taken versus the one of those options that you ultimately recommended to them?
Yeah. Now, one of the main things I'm very proud of is we worked with North Carolina, actually
Yeah.
with the New Hanover County. And one of the things was talking about floods. So when we came to work with them, we spoke about 20 feet floods. In the past they had just once in a few years, and now they're having a lot of them. And we ran everything in our platform. And actually, it was amazing. We spoke about evacuation. So they had a plan to evacuate 2,800 people. Actually, through the system, we understood they will need to evacuate 20,000 people.
Wow.
And they had only two roads as options. And our system gave them option number three. One they didn't even think about was evacuation by sea. And also we showed them that the shelters they plan to evacuate, 60% of them will be flooded. So, that was amazing seeing the face of the emergency managers, just understanding how in advance they can be prepared for a big event that probably can save lives and understand
Yeah.
their situations, regarding a lot of things. So for me, that was a great success, really a great success. And we did it, from their question to getting answers to just collecting their data, working with their data, first time using their data and open source data. It took, 48 hours, and that's a very, I think, very fast onboarding process, for
Yeah.
a new customer. And it already brought value because my goal is to bring value. My goal is to help people make those better decisions. And if you don't get value from forecast, don't take us. That's my motto.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an incredibly fast turnaround, and it's amazing the value that we can get just by knowing about something, like knowing that we have other options, like you said, the sea route, knowing that these buildings will be flooded, because a lot of times people might think that to create a lot of value, they need to create some fundamentally for flooding, for example, some fundamentally new like physical technology, some kind of better way to build housing or raising the houses above the water level. But here it's just being informed, knowing that these are the options, and if I take these actions, then I can just completely avoid a lot of the deaths, the destruction that's coming. And so, what specifically led to what in your models or what data did you guys pull on to realize that there's kind of this whole other option of the C route. Was that because I'm trying to imagine how that works with AI, or is that more just being able to locate the pertinent data? You found that okay, this is important, and we actually have more options when we look at that data. We can go via the C route.
So actually, when in our platform we have models, right? Those models connect data. So we have four major, or we can say five major models. The first model talks about the goals of that specific organization. It can be company, but in this case, it was the emergency manager. So, of course, it's saving lives, mitigating disasters, keeping the lifelines for their communities. We have a risk assessment model that runs all the time, the best practice risks running in those environments. It can be floods, fire attack, cyber attacks, wildfires, you name it,
Yeah,
active shooter, whatever. We have readiness and resilience models running in the background. For example, resilience is, my roads, my hospitals, and all those areas. And we
yeah,
have mitigation models. Why? Because once we show you a problem, we give you an actionable recommendation. We say, okay, you won't be able to evacuate through here. This is what we recommend you do. And you can also run it in the system, see some kind of simulation, what will happen, how will be the impact of your decision. Then we collect all the data that is, in this case, we do a lot of open source data, GIS data, for example, population, people with disabilities, things like that. And we have also a lot of different behavior models that we already trained. For example, how to evacuate people by sea, by road. And we have historical data. So the system runs and calculates and says, hey, there's a port here. Hey, they did in the past some kind of evacuation. Why don't they call the Coast Guard or use, commercial ships? So this is where AI comes in mind. And it's amazing because what happens is we did in the past, it's called a lot of heuristic models. So actually, I did this a lot of years ago. That was agent-based simulation. Today, those are AI agents that we connect as agentic AI. And it
yeah,
runs all the times and creates a neural network with a lot of different states. And it learns and learns and learns. Sometimes it gives you, state you say, okay, that's not relevant. We validate it all the time. And in this case, this is why immediately the system said, hey, why don't you evacuate by sea? It also brought
yeah,
the recommendation why it's better, faster, it will save more lives. And I'll give you the example. It by sea you could evacuate in 12 hours instead of by roads in 72 hours. So imagine the time gap that you have before the flood hits you. So that was one of the issues.
yeah.
I,
And
I,
when
ho-
you
I hope that was
yeah.
helpful and not, drilling down too much information. So,
Yeah, no, that was great. That I like to get into those details and really see how these decisions are being informed. It definitely helps paint the picture for how your product comes up with these decisions. And so when the models do produce their suggestions, how much how essential is the interpretation of you and your team of the models versus or is it just the suggestions for the models are so clear that anyone could take that suggestion and run with it, or is there a lot of interpretation?
so we actually developed a very nice UI where you can
Yeah.
see the options, everything, you can see the recommendation and the impact of everything. We
Okay.
always like to say there's always a man in the loop. Why there's a man in the loop? Because these are high level decisions. For example, in decision intelligence, a lot of people talk about decision automation. Decision automation can happen, when I'm a factory and the system can make a decision, to run faster or slower. In this case, the user experience is very simple. A lot of times we like to work, as a solution. So train the end users or partner with some kind of consultant group that sit down, and there's a discussion because a lot of times it can show about budget. We can give you the best recommendation, but hey, you don't have enough budget. So what's my
Mm.
second option? And you can keep on asking questions to the system and say, okay, what will happen in this case? I don't have enough. You told me I need $1 million. I have 500K. What can I do with it? And it's an ongoing process and the system is learning. So we're pretty proud of it.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. That back and forth process of asking questions, updating the models, and then offering new suggestions. It makes me think that I mean, even in my day-to-day life, I could use something like that. Right now I use we all use we talk with LLMs, we get advice from them, but it'd be great if they kind of sourced a lot more of our data and kind of did guide us through decisions in day-to-day life. Is that have you guys ever considered a consumer facing product?
We thought about it. We're still not there. We're mainly seeing our value in complex problems, like I told you, defense, emergency
Yeah.
management, utilities, areas like that. And maybe later on, because what we did, we also implemented in our technology LLMs, but actually we have a big machine learning concept that decides if he uses LLM sometimes, or if he uses mathematical models, or it uses the other techniques like simulation. You ask it as a chat and you have a nice dashboard and everything. But the idea is it's based on our models. So it's not 60% accurate like a lot of times happens, when you use, I don't know, ChatGPT or something. It needs to be 90, 95% as accurate as can be. So we're focusing, vertical by vertical. And yeah, we're in the discovery process, deciding where's our next step, where it will be.
Got it.
It can be also for some kind of VC in what companies to invest. Imagine getting the options, understanding who will bring value at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of our, let's say, next steps in our business roadmap, at least. But we want to be as best as we can be and bring the most added value in every vertical that we're working at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you say you guys are discussing the options for the future, it makes me think. I mean, do you use your own models to make internal decisions for your company, or are they more oriented towards external clients where it doesn't make sense to use them internally?
Well, I use it internally, and it's
You do,
amazing
yeah,
because, first of all, I try it on myself. I'll give you an example. I talk a lot about helping leaders achieve their goals. So I
yeah,
actually inputted my business goal, where I want to be 4 years from now, for example. And I saw what's impacting my roadmap. So what are the areas that are most risky for me, for example? And I said, okay, what happens in this case? And then I can see that, I'll give you an example. A very important customer, if I don't do my delivery well, if there's no customer success and value there, he can,
right.
it's like a domino run falling down, can impact another customer, can impact my roadmap. So I manage my risks through my platform and I see how it works. And also remember, every question, everything that we input to the system learns. So we validate it. It defines, it's a better model, so we can also deliver it to our customers.
Yeah, that always seems like a very valuable thing to be able to use your own product in your day-to-day business because you can then literally put your shoes or put yourself in the shoes of the customer and see how is your product performing, and then
Exactly.
that really kind of tightens that feedback loop to improve it. So before you had mentioned that around 80% of the models is more generic based off of data that you can transfer from project to project, and then 20% more specific. Where would you guys say is your kind of edge in front of any kind of competition? Is it that extra 20%? What would stop another company from, say, yeah, training these up to 80%, generic training, and trying to compete? Would you say is it that 20%, or is it the relationships that you guys are building? What gives you your competitive edge?
First of all, I think, that our solution is a little bit different because we talk mainly to all levels of decision makers.
Yeah,
And I think it's only one of the solutions that we bring our behavior models, 80% models ready. For example, when I go to defense customers, I see that other companies just come with those engineers that have good technologies, but now let's start bringing your data, learning from your data, and we're bringing all this experience already that exists in the platform. The platform integrates everything. So, a lot of systems work in silos, just in the HR, just in the IT, just in the operations. We connect everything. So you understand the impact of everything, what's happening. And I think one of the major values is, you have systems that show you what happened in the past, right? Like an ERP system, a BI, you have predictive analytics, you have AI giving you some forecasting, but we're actually giving you recommendations. What should you do? What's the mitigation strategy? What's the actionable recommendation? And if you decide to accept our recommendation, you can see a simulation. What will happen? What if? So I think that's where we see our value. We also see the value because we're in a very small layer, for the decision maker that we can actually integrate and partner with a lot of groups. This is why we partnered, for example, with SAP and Siemens. And we can also partner with Palantir. Sometimes we can compete, sometimes we can partner. They're a lot bigger than us and bring value to our end customers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about how you guys actually boil it down to a specific decision suggestion that you give to the customer because recently at one of my events I met actually a former classmate of mine that is doing very well with the startup right now. They raised $2 million, and what he does is he gives also using AI models, it gives advice to franchises. And he was saying that there are plenty of BI dashboards out there that can just give you a bunch of data and information, but what really benefits the customers if you use your models to give them direct decisions to be made or suggestions for what's basically what they do is provide information on what are the driving factors that make one franchise location very successful versus another one not so successful. So really giving them those boiled down decisions on what needs to be changed in order to improve the whole franchise. So yeah, common thread there that yeah, that's probably something that could apply to many industries.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I can tell you from my past, my background, I started with BI. A lot of times was, yeah, this is what you should do. But it's a bunch of information if you don't have someone
Right.
telling you, okay, take this, connect it. And this is why what AI does today, right? It connects all the dots. Now just let's bring a decision intelligence layer that says, okay, this is what you should do. Because that's missing a lot of times, and that's interesting. And I think, as AI is evolving and agents are evolving in different markets, I think it will just grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so you're phoning in from Israel, and I'm assuming that you started your startup in Israel, or if not, let me know. But what was it like to start a startup there, and how did that influence the whole process?
So yeah, I started in Israel, although always I wanted to work international, and this is why we have now subsidiaries in the US and Germany. We grew pretty much. So actually, it was helpful starting in Israel because I started in the defense sector, and this is where you want to be, seeing those decision makers. My main stakeholders, or let's call it investors, were my end customers, seeing their problems
Okay. Yeah.
and understanding and developing technology. Although I can tell you that a lot of times I had a lot of challenges, and this is something I tell young founders today. Don't listen. Be focused on your idea because everyone told me I was crazy. I would never create a technology that will help decision makers. And I told them I will be
Right.
partners with big companies like SAP. And they said, you can't make it. It won't work. And luckily for me, I don't know why, maybe it's
Yeah.
how I grew. I kept on with my ideas, and actually, it came from the field. People said, yeah, I would love to have such a technology. I validated it all the time and developed. And then we grew. We moved to the US, started working with emergency managers, seeing the energy grid challenges, grew in Europe. So we're expanding. And I think the environment, although, Israel and the US are very similar, there's a lot of innovation hubs. People talk a lot about innovation, want to find solutions. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. People are very creative and that brings a lot of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And which town or city did you are you based out of?
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv. Okay, gotcha. And Tel Aviv, if I understand it, is that the kind of main hub for tech startups in Israel?
Yeah, although it's a small country, wherever you go, it's someone with
Wherever, yeah.
some kind of idea. But yeah, that's a major area. And I can tell you also in the US, although our company is based in New York, we have offices there, but we also have our defense US company in Maryland, where there's a great hub. And in the past, I had offices in Montana, actually in Missoula, Montana,
Really,
working
huh?
with the pipeline companies. I think, because it's a global world, everything's, connected today, then you can find a lot of innovation, a lot of talent of people, a lot of great ideas. Just a lot of time you need someone that helps them be focused, go in the right direction, maybe do those right things. Because, I see beautiful ideas, beautiful developments that, don't succeed because they need a little bit of guidance. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. I mean, I find myself it's always like it's always easy as an entrepreneur to get distracted by many different opportunities, but to be able to focus on one is critical. Um, and before when you're talking about you mentioned to your friends you're starting this company, you want to break into partnering with these big companies like SAP. What do you think was required to first, break in and get momentum in this industry? I mean, was there a certain point and some certain components that you had that allowed you to break in?
Yeah. So first of all, I think the main issue was before technology, I had a concept. It took me time to be there and say, okay, this is what my solution solves. This is my value. This is what I bring to the market. And I learned very well the market. And when I met with the people from SAP talking about, I started from the defense and security sector. I knew what they had. I knew the challenges of the market. And I was, bringing them a big part of the puzzle to give their customers a full solution from A to Z. So I brought them to new areas, not just to the tech guys, the IT guys, but also to the decision maker level. So that's defining what's the right approach. In my case, because I went to markets, like defense, emergency management, energy, that there's long cycles, government contracts.
Yeah.
So partnering with big groups, I think is a good idea. Although, if you ask me as a startup, a lot of startups need to be careful because there's sometimes giants that will swallow you a lot of times. So
Got it. Got it. Thanks for passing that advice along. Do you feel that this will be like sort of its own industry eventually? AI powered decision making, will this grow into a kind of its own? Will we look back and be surprised that we ever made decisions without AI? And it'll kind of become the standard.
totally, totally. I can tell you that I'll give you an example. Today, if you talk to Gartner, for example, they'll tell you they have a full vertical called decision intelligence, right? So,
Yeah.
and if you go to Forrester, they'll talk to you about AI for decisions. And I think, that forecast is in a different vertical now, because we work with a lot of decision makers, but I totally think, let's say 3, 4 years from now, I don't see a C-level manager making decisions without AI. And I'm not talking about, Gen AI or talking to ChatGPT, but having those specific applications for different areas. It can be in the financial world or e-commerce, doesn't matter. And yeah, totally. It's like, it's like today you say, hey, how did people don't have iPhones in the past, right? So it's like, really?
Right.
And I think it's totally there. I believe it will be 3 to 4 years, something like that. That's my,
Yeah.
personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. And if they aren't adopting it by that time, then they could be in trouble.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Because they will be in trouble against their competition. Yeah.
right. Exactly. Yeah. And when you first branched out to other countries, was that challenging to leap into another country, another culture? I know I had a previous guest on who's an investor. He's from Germany, then he worked in Silicon Valley, and then he was off in Taiwan to help startups there grow globally. And he's saying that it's very tough to put your own team in another country. It's much easier because they don't understand the culture. It's much easier to grow natively a new team in that new country. I'm curious if you took that approach or another one.
Yeah, totally. I agree. So yeah, it's a different approach. For example, when I started in the US, I actually went to an event that's called Select USA. The idea is that you work with different economic development locally. You create those local jobs. And my idea was recruiting a local team because, there's also a culture issue. For example, when you recruit a American sales guy, he knows how to talk to people. He understands, their language. Because a lot of times for other people, it's, translated from their own language.
Yeah.
And Yeah, but it's a challenge because you need to learn the culture, you need to learn the regulations, the governance issues, especially when talking about IP and AI and things like that. And also learning how to work, with local teams. So yeah, and it's different when I worked in Germany and the Netherlands and the UK, and usually in every place I partner with groups and I grow a local team. So I have my boots on the ground of people that are forecast people, know my technology, but are actually native. And it took me a few years, learning that lesson. Yeah, it takes time. It takes time. Also learning, that if it's the same market vertical, it's also different, especially in where I work. The regulation in Europe is different from the US, for example, standards, things like that.
Right. Yeah, well that's good to confirm that that previous advice that I got that different people are seeing the same pattern. So if I have a startup one day and I'm expanding across borders, then I'll keep that in mind. And what would you say, looking back, are some of the or one of the or some of the biggest challenges that you faced? Of course, the life of an entrepreneur is all challenges, but is there anything that really stands out as like being the at the time you just thought, oh, this is impossible, but then eventually you got through?
Yeah, it's like you get the feeling that you're always chasing the market. Technology is evolving so fast, and you have an idea, you're developing it, and you see the market is changing, and it takes time to be very focused on what you want to do. For me, my main challenge was actually two. One of them is because I actually developed a platform. It's not just a one solution for one problem. And as a platform, it's challenging because you're focused on a market and everyone says, "Hey, you can use it for here, for there." They take your focus out of those areas. And the other challenge was chasing the market, validating your solution, validating your value proposition. You go to a lot of meetings, you hear from people, "Wow, amazing, interesting." They don't call back, right? So
Right, right.
so I think that's a challenge, but I think that if I had a good advice for founders of startups, be for the long run. Sometimes, it's a
Okay.
it's a budget issue, but try to be there for the long run,
Yeah.
and keep on if you believe in what you're doing. If you're validating it with the market, it takes time. It takes its time a lot of times.
Yeah, validation is something that it's so crucial and can save founders so much time, but it's very easy to just sort of yeah, get a little bit lazy with it or cut some corners and think that okay, this feels like it should work. Do you have any specific methods that you use for validation?
Actually, what I did always to validate was go as fast as I can to the market. And it's amazing because later on when people started talking about the lean canvas concept, that's exactly how I work. Okay, this is the market, this is the problem. Who do I need to think to talk to? Usually I come, it's not a sales meeting. It's, I want to meet a CEO of a hospital because I think my solution can help them. And I just come and talk to him about his problems. What does he have? What kind of challenges? If such a technology could have helped him, this is the first phase of validating it. The second phase, a lot of times, is okay, let's try not a POC. I don't believe in POCs. POCs is checking technology. I like to call it, phase one of a project. Because if you want to really see to get insights for decision making from an AI solution, let's install it in your environment, run it for 1 year and see actually the value that you get. You don't get value, let's stop working on it. And that's how I validate it all the time. I went to the energy sector. I started with a company in Montana running some kind of challenge they had. And I saw all the time, how my models are bringing value to the end customer. And some areas, there's no need or the value is not so big that they would want to pay for it. That's how I validated my solution. And I'm still doing it until today. I do every 2 months a round table with customers and partners and invite them and show my roadmap and new developments and tell them what do you think about it? What are your needs? What would you like to achieve? What would you like to get from the system? So, and that's helping, hearing everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the advice of really testing out your idea, your solution in real life because I mean, Yeah, if you take that empirical approach, there's no disputing it. If it literally is providing value, then that's the ultimate validation. And if not, then at least you get the feedback to see well what's not working and why is it not working. So yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. If there's something that you could pass on to another entrepreneur that would provide them, a ton of value, maybe save them a lot of time, a year or two of their life, some pitfall that maybe you ran into. What's some insight like that you would pass on to a new entrepreneur?
So first of all, like I said, it's believing in yourself, in your idea,
Yeah.
trying as fast as you can to create that, lean canvas idea of the solution, run a little bit of technology, some kind of first MVP, but also be open-minded. If you went, I don't know, let's say you have a startup that says I'm solving something for doctors, for example, but you went and met immediately five doctors and saw there's no value, then pivot. See how you can pivot it immediately, or you maybe you're bringing value but not enough value. In the past, for example, I saw great technology that helps doctors, in operations, for example. But then the doctor said, okay, if you save me 2 hours of the operation, I want it. If it's just 5 minutes, I don't need that tech. So,
Yeah, I see.
and a lot of times try to meet with people, talk to founders, talk to people that succeeded, hear their ideas and learn from them. Take whatever you want for yourself because I think there's a lot of people, and I do it myself also, that love to help, young founders, talk to them, have just a half-hour conversation. I think that will be helpful. I didn't have it, when I started it, but I think today there's a lot of openness there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for anyone that wants to capitalize on that last piece of advice of learning from founders, I hope from this interview and others are able to learn a lot. And I know certainly I've learned a lot. So usually that's my last question. But your story about the advice you gave in North Carolina was so interesting. I would love if you have the time to go through one more case where you guys informed the decision and created a really good outcome.
I can give you an example of a utility company
Yeah.
where, for example, every year there's flood in one of their stations and they cannot support the SLA of their customers, providing them with gas. Okay,
And where is this?
this is in Montana. We work with
Montana. Okay. Yeah.
Northwestern Energy. Yeah, the idea was
Yeah.
they got, once, the river floods a lot of times, so they have no capacity to provide gas to their customers because their station is near the river. And we created options where the main options was, okay, can you use trucks to move gas, because people need, their houses to keep warm with the gas and things
Right.
like that. And one of the recommendations from the system was invest in a new pipeline. But it was too expensive. It was like $56 million. And, their CEO was like, no, I'm not investing this amount.
Yeah.
But when we showed them the options and told them, look, every year that you're not achieving your SLA, you're getting a $1 million a month fine. So every year you're paying something like 10 to $15 million of a fine against investing one time in new infrastructure, new pipeline, and that can be helpful. So that was also good, not just for his day-to-day operations, that he needs to support his customers on a daily basis, but also talking about grid modernizations, new infrastructure, new pipelines. So those are the type of recommendations we give. We have a lot of recommendations we help in the defense sector to save lives. So I'm pretty proud of what we've done. And also what's interesting, after we gave those recommendations, what to do, how to achieve your goals, we did an after action review to see what happened, later on. And we
Yeah.
saw that we got a 94% accuracy in our recommendations. And that's pretty high
That's great. Yeah.
if you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing that you guys are able to. I mean, the previous example was amazing as well. There was the disaster in Carolina, but yeah, even to see another case here where there's a long term and massive investment being made that will affect the region for decades to come. To see that we can make those kinds of decisions better. I mean, if we had that going on every decision that we made on a large scale, imagine the benefits that would give to the entire country in the U.S. case here, but yeah, across the world. So pretty impressive stuff. But yeah, Nassim, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining me on the podcast here. I agree with you completely that the future will be AI based decision making, and it's a pleasure to have spoken to one of the original AI based decision makers. So yeah, thanks for telling me your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me today and great job what you're doing. I think it's amazing, helping young founders. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.